This is HOA Spot. The paint marks on my lawn became her evidence. I do not care what you think you heard. That was Julie Perez, Community Standards Chair for the Commons at Maplewood HOA in St. Paul, Minnesota, standing on my driveway with her phone on a gimbal, filming me from 6 inches away. She was yelling that my fence was now a community issue, and she would make it my problem publicly. One fence panel was leaning against my house. It had been there for maybe 10 minutes while my contractor crew took a water break. Julie decided that was outdoor storage, a violation of guidelines she swore existed but could never produce in writing. I am a mortgage loan officer. I understand lien consequences. I know what happens when an HOA decides you are the problem and starts stacking fines like Jenga blocks. I bought this house 8 months ago because the price was right and the commute was easy. The Commons at Maplewood is one of those communities where the compliance chair carries a ruler and a stopwatch, and Julie Perez treats the rule book like scripture she gets to edit in real time. The fence panel issue started because I needed to replace a rotted section along my back property line. The old fence was falling apart, half the posts were leaning, and my home insurance agent had already sent me a polite letter suggesting I address it before renewal. I hired a local contractor, pulled the city permit, and scheduled the work for a Tuesday morning. Julie showed up before the truck was unloaded. You do not build to my standard, you pay to my standard. That was her opener. No hello, no introduction, just a demand that I stop work immediately because my fence design was not compliant. I asked what rule it violated. She said she would get back to me. Then she took photos of the truck, the materials, and my contractor like she was documenting a crime scene. The next day, I got an email from the HOA with a formal warning. The subject line said immediate compliance required. The body of the email was 2 sentences. It said my fence project was not approved, and any further work would result in daily fines starting at $50 and escalating. There was no citation of a specific rule. There was no reference to a design guideline, just a threat. I called the HOA management company. The woman on the phone said Julie had submitted a complaint about unauthorized construction, and they were required to follow up. I explained I had a city permit. She said the city permit did not override HOA rules. I asked what rule I was violating. She said she would check and call me back. She never called back. I went to the hardware store and bought a tape measure, a level, and a can of orange spray paint. I walked my property line and marked the survey stakes. My fence was going to sit 2 inches inside my property line. Completely legal, completely mine. I took photos of every stake, every measurement, every angle. Then I called my contractor and told him to keep going. Julie showed up again the next morning. This time she brought a clipboard and a megaphone. She stood in front of the contractor truck and used the megaphone to announce that the project was halted pending board review. My contractor, a guy named Dan, who had been installing fences for 20 years, looked at me like he was waiting for permission to laugh. I told him to unload anyway. Julie started reading from her clipboard. She said the fence height exceeded community standards. I asked what the standard was. She said 6 feet. I said my fence was 5 feet 10 inches. She said that was a distinction without a difference. Dan unloaded the truck. Julie filmed the whole thing. Then she got in her car and left. That afternoon, I got another email. This one had an attachment. It was a notice of violation with a fine schedule, $50 a day starting immediately, $100 a day after 7 days, $250 a day after 14 days. The violation was listed as unauthorized exterior modification. There was still no citation of a specific rule. I printed the email, I printed the permit, I printed my survey, I printed my photos. Then I drove to the HOA office and asked to see the architectural guidelines. The woman at the desk said they were available for review by appointment only. I said I wanted to make an appointment. She said the next available slot was 3 weeks out. I said that was unacceptable. She said it was policy. I left. I called an attorney. He listened to my story and said it sounded like selective enforcement. He asked if I had documentation. I said I had everything. He said to keep going and let them escalate. He said the more unreasonable they got, the better my case would be. The next morning, Julie was back. This time, she had a ride-share driver waiting in the street. The driver was leaning against his car, rolling his eyes, while Julie stood on my lawn with her phone filming the fence crew. She was narrating like a true crime podcaster. She said I was defying the board. She said I was setting a dangerous precedent. She said the community would not tolerate this behavior. Dan finished the back section by noon. The fence looked great. It was straight, level, and exactly where it was supposed to be. I took more photos. I measured again. Everything was perfect. Then I noticed something. The survey stakes on the far corner had been moved. Not by much, maybe 6 inches, but enough to make it look like my fence was over the line. I pulled out my phone and called the survey company. I explained what happened. The surveyor said he could come back out, but it would cost me another $300. I said fine. He said he could be there in 2 days. I said I needed it sooner. He said he was booked. I asked if he could come at sunrise. He laughed and said he would see what he could do. That night, I got a knock on my door. It was Julie. She had a stack of papers in her hand. She said she was hand-delivering a formal notice of hearing. I was being summoned to appear before the board in 10 days to answer for my violations. The notice listed 3 charges: unauthorized construction, failure to obtain architectural approval, refusal to comply with board directives. The notice said if I did not appear, the fines would continue and the board would pursue a lien. I took the papers. I did not say anything. Silence makes people talk. Julie stood there for a second like she was waiting for me to argue. Then she said something I will never forget. The board will back me because they are afraid of me. She said it like it was a fact, like it was something she was proud of. Then she walked back to her car and left. I went inside and read the notice. It was 3 pages long. Most of it was boilerplate. But buried in the second page was a line that caught my attention. It said the board reserved the right to take immediate corrective action if the violation posed a risk to community safety or property values. I highlighted that line. I had a feeling I would need it later. The next morning, the surveyor showed up at 6. He restaked the entire property line and took photos of the disturbed stakes. He said it was obvious someone had moved them. He said he would include that in his report. I asked if he could note the time and date. He said absolutely. I paid him in cash and thanked him. By 8, Julie was back. She saw the surveyor and her face went red. She marched over and demanded to know what he was doing. He said he was verifying the property line. She said the property line was not in dispute. He said it clearly was because someone had moved his stakes. She said that was a baseless accusation. He said he had photos. She walked away. Dan and his crew finished the side fence by noon. Julie showed up with a tape measure. She measured the fence height 3 times. Then she measured the setback from the property line. Then she took photos. Then she told Dan that his vehicles would be cited or towed if they returned. Dan looked at me. I told him to finish the front section tomorrow. Julie said there would not be a tomorrow. I said we would see. That night, I got another email. This one said the HOA had contacted a towing company and authorized them to remove any contractor vehicles from the community if they were associated with my property. The email included a reference number and a warning that I would be responsible for all towing and storage fees. I called my attorney. He said that was probably illegal. He said towing a contractor vehicle from a private driveway without cause could open the HOA to liability. He said to document everything and let them try. I said I was not sure I wanted to play chicken with a tow truck. He said it was my call, but the more aggressive they got, the better my case would be. The next morning, Dan showed up with his crew. 10 minutes later, a tow truck showed up. The driver parked in the street and got out. Julie was directing him like an air traffic controller. She pointed at Dan's truck. She pointed at my driveway. The tow driver looked uncomfortable. He walked over to Dan and asked if he was parked legally. Dan said he was on private property with the owner's permission. The tow driver shrugged and walked back to Julie. They argued for a minute. Then the tow driver got in his truck and left. Julie was furious. She marched over to me and said I was creating a hostile environment. I asked how. She said I was defying the board and undermining her authority. I said I was installing a fence on my own property. She said it was not that simple. I said it was exactly that simple. She said I would regret this. Then she got in her car and left. That afternoon, the HOA sent a vendor to my property, 2 guys in a truck with the HOA logo on the side. They said they were there to remove materials that were blocking common area access. I said there were no materials blocking anything. They pointed at a stack of fence boards on my driveway. I said that was my property. They said they had authorization to remove it. I said if they touched my property, I would call the police. They made a phone call. Then they left. I was starting to see the pattern. Julie was not trying to enforce rules. She was trying to make my life so difficult that I would give up. Every time I pushed back, she escalated. Every time she escalated, I documented. I had emails, photos, recordings, and witness statements. My neighbor across the street had been watching the whole thing. She gave me a written statement and photos with timestamps. Another neighbor, 2 doors down, did the same. They both said Julie had been harassing me since day one, and they were willing to testify if it came to that. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama and property line revenge tales. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday night at 7. I spent the week preparing. I printed every email. I printed every photo. I organized everything in a binder with tabs. I called my attorney and asked if he wanted to come. He said he would be there. I asked what I should expect. He said, expect them to be dismissive and expect them to double down. He said boards like this hated being challenged, and they would try to intimidate me into backing down. Thursday came. I showed up 15 minutes early. The hearing was in the clubhouse conference room, 5 board members sitting at a long table. Julie was sitting at the end with her clipboard and her phone. There were maybe a dozen other residents in the room. Most of them looked bored. A few looked curious. The board president called the meeting to order. He read the charges: unauthorized construction, failure to obtain architectural approval, refusal to comply with board directives. He asked if I had anything to say. I stood up. I said I had a lot to say. I opened my binder and started walking through the timeline. I showed the city permit. I showed the survey. I showed the photos of the moved stakes. I showed the emails with no rule citations. I showed the witness statements. I read one of them out loud so it would be in the minutes. It described Julie measuring my fence 3 times, filming my contractor, and threatening to tow vehicles. Julie interrupted. She said I was misrepresenting the situation. I said I was reading from a signed witness statement with photos in identical lighting. She said the photos proved nothing. I said they proved she was on my property without permission multiple times. She said she had every right to inspect potential violations. I said she had no right to move survey stakes. The room went quiet. The board president asked Julie if she moved the stakes. She said no. I asked if she was calling the surveyor a liar. She said the surveyor made a mistake. I said the surveyor documented the disturbance with time-stamped photos and a written report. I pulled out the report and handed it to the board president. He read it. Then he passed it to the board member next to him. Julie stood up. She said this was a waste of time. She said the fence was still not compliant and the fines would continue. I asked what rule it violated. She said the height exceeded standards. I said the standard was 6 feet and my fence was 5 feet 10 inches. She said that did not matter. I said it absolutely mattered. I said selective enforcement was illegal, and I had documentation of every interaction. Then I said something I had been holding back. I said I had additional evidence that would clarify the situation, but I was waiting for the right moment to share it. Julie asked what evidence. I said I would get to that. I said almost nothing, because silence makes people talk. Julie lost it. She started yelling. She said I was being difficult on purpose. She said I was trying to make her look bad. She said the board would back her because they were afraid of her. She repeated it, word for word, the exact line she had said to me on my doorstep. The board president cut her off. He said that was enough. He asked me to continue. I said I appreciated the opportunity to present my case, but I wanted to make sure the board understood the stakes. I explained that I was trying to keep my home insurance stable and the HOA was pushing me toward a claim. I said the fines and threats were creating a financial burden that could affect my ability to maintain the property. I said that was bad for everyone. One of the board members asked if I had tried to work with Julie. I said I had tried multiple times. I showed the emails where I asked for rule citations and got threats instead. I showed the timeline of escalation. I pointed out that every time I complied with one demand, Julie invented a new one. Another board member asked Julie if that was true. She said I was twisting the facts. I said I was reading directly from her emails. She said I was taking things out of context. I said the context was clear. I said she was using her position to harass me and I wanted it to stop. The board president said they would take a short recess to discuss. Everyone stood up. Julie walked over to me and said I was making a huge mistake. I did not respond. My attorney leaned over and said I was doing great. He said to keep calm and let them implode. 10 minutes later, the board came back. The president said they had reviewed the evidence and they had concerns about the process. He said they would table the fines pending further review. He said they would schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss the architectural guidelines. Julie stood up and said that was unacceptable. The president told her to sit down. Julie did not sit down. She said the board was setting a dangerous precedent. She said if they let me get away with this, every homeowner would start ignoring the rules. She said she had worked too hard to let the community fall apart. The president said the meeting was adjourned. Julie stormed out. I left the clubhouse and walked to my car. My attorney followed me. He said that went better than expected. He said the board was clearly uncomfortable with Julie's behavior and they were looking for a way out. He said the key now was to keep pressure on them without giving them an excuse to retaliate. I asked what he meant. He said, do not provoke her. Do not respond to her emails. Let her dig her own hole. The next morning, I got an email from the HOA management company. It said the board had voted to suspend the fines pending a review of the architectural guidelines. It said the review would be completed within 30 days. It said I was expected to cooperate fully. I forwarded the email to my attorney. He said it was progress, but not a resolution. He said to stay ready. Julie did not take the suspension well. She started showing up at random times. She would park across the street and sit in her car filming my house. She would walk the property line with a tape measure and take notes. She never spoke to me. She just documented. It was creepy and deliberate. Then I got a call from a gate vendor technician. He said the HOA had hired him to review the community access logs. He said my name kept coming up in connection with contractor vehicle entries. He said Julie had requested a report on every vehicle associated with my address for the last 6 months. He said it felt weird and he wanted to give me a heads up. I asked if he could explain the logs to me. He said sure. We met at a coffee shop and he walked me through the system. He showed me timestamps, entry codes, and vehicle descriptions. Everything was documented. Everything was normal. There was no evidence of any problem. I asked him if he would be willing to testify if it came to that. He said absolutely. He said he had seen HOA's abuse access logs before, and he did not want to be part of it. I thanked him and bought him a coffee. That night, I got another email from Julie. She said she had completed her review and she was recommending the board pursue a lien. She said my fence was a continuing violation and the community had a responsibility to enforce standards. She attached a draft lien notice. The amount was over $5,000. I called my attorney. He said it was time to play the trump card. I asked if he was sure. He said absolutely. He said we had everything we needed and waiting longer would only make it worse. I said okay. He said to meet him at his office in the morning. The next day we drafted a letter. It included copies of all my documentation. It included the surveyor report. It included the witness statements. It included the access logs showing no violations. And it included something I had been holding back. An HOA insurance document showing their coverage was at risk because of harassment claims. I had requested it weeks ago under a records request that the board had tried to ignore. My attorney had pushed, and eventually they sent it. Buried in the policy was a clause that said the HOA could lose coverage if board members engaged in targeted harassment or selective enforcement. We sent the letter to the board president, the management company, and Julie. Then we scheduled a meeting at the clubhouse for the following afternoon. My attorney said we were going to play it on speaker outside the clubhouse so neighbors could hear it in real time. The meeting was tense. Julie showed up early. She tried to take control of the agenda. My attorney cut her off and started reading the letter. He explained the insurance clause. He explained the liability. He explained that if the HOA continued down this path, they would lose coverage and individual board members could be personally liable for damages. The board president went pale. One of the other board members asked if that was accurate. My attorney said it was in their own policy. He handed them a copy. Julie interrupted. She said I was bluffing. She said the insurance clause did not apply because she had not done anything wrong. My attorney asked if she wanted to explain the moved survey stakes on the record. She said that was never proven. He said the surveyor documented it with photos and a signed report. He said we also had witness statements describing her repeated trespassing and harassment. He said we had access logs showing no contractor violations. He said we had emails showing selective enforcement. He said the pattern was clear. Then he pulled out the final piece, a records request that exposed contradictions and edits. Julie had submitted multiple versions of her complaint. The first version said my fence was 6 inches over the property line. The second version said it was 2 inches over the setback requirement. The third version said it was non-compliant due to height. None of the versions matched. The timestamps proved she kept changing her story. Julie went silent. The board president asked her to explain. She said she was refining her observations. My attorney said she was inventing violations. He said the evidence showed a pattern of retaliation and bad faith. He said if the board did not act, we would file a lawsuit and request an injunction. The board president called a recess. Julie tried to follow him into the back room. He told her to wait outside. 20 minutes later, he came back. He said the board had voted to retract the lien notice. He said they would send a correction email to the community clarifying that my fence was compliant. He said they would also be reviewing Julie's role as compliance chair. Julie exploded. She said they were making a mistake. She said the community would fall apart without strong enforcement. The president said strong enforcement was not the same as harassment. He said the board had a fiduciary duty to protect the HOA from liability, and Julie's actions were putting everyone at risk. He said effective immediately, she was being asked to step down as compliance chair. He said she could remain on the board in a non-enforcement role, or she could resign. Julie said she would not resign. She said she would fight this. The president said that was her choice, but the decision was final. Then he turned to me and apologized. He said the board should have intervened sooner. He said they were committed to making this right. The next week, the HOA sent a formal letter confirming the retraction. They also sent a check reimbursing me for the surveyor fees and the attorney consultation. My attorney said it was a good outcome. He said most HOAs would have dragged it out for months. He said the insurance angle had scared them into acting fast. Julie tried to spin the situation on the neighborhood group chat. She posted a long message saying she had been unfairly targeted and the board was caving to bullies. A few people liked her post. Most people ignored it. One neighbor replied with a screenshot of her threatening to tow contractor vehicles and asked if that was fair enforcement. Julie deleted her post and went quiet. 2 weeks later, I got a notice that Julie had resigned from the board. The notice said she was stepping down to focus on personal matters. The new compliance chair sent an email introducing herself and promising a fresh approach. She said the board would be reviewing all outstanding violations and ensuring consistent enforcement. She said homeowners with questions were encouraged to reach out directly. I finished my fence. It looked great. Dan said it was one of the smoothest projects he had worked on once the HOA backed off. He said he had seen situations like mine before, and most people gave up. He said he was glad I pushed back. A few months later, I ran into Julie at the grocery store. She saw me and turned around. I did not say anything. I just kept shopping. Some battles are not worth refighting. The funny part came about 6 weeks after the hearing. The board had hired an independent auditor to review compliance records. The auditor found that Julie had been issuing violations with deadlines that did not match the actual dates she filed complaints. In one case, she insisted a homeowner had 10 days to comply, but the timestamp on her submission proved she backdated the complaint to create urgency. The board had to send correction letters to 3 other homeowners and void thousands of dollars in fines. Julie could not spin that. The records spoke for themselves. The final piece came when I filed a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Commission about the selective enforcement and harassment. My attorney helped me draft it. The commission opened an investigation. I do not know what the outcome will be, but I know Julie received a letter asking her to respond to the allegations. My attorney said that was enough. He said even if nothing formal happened, the paper trail would follow her. The HOA ended up revising their architectural guidelines. The new version included clear measurements, explicit timelines, and a requirement that all violations be supported by photographic evidence and rule citations. The board also implemented a new appeals process that allowed homeowners to challenge decisions without waiting weeks for a hearing. It was not perfect, but it was better. My fence is still standing. It has survived 2 Minnesota winters, and it looks exactly like it did the day Dan finished it. Every time I look at it, I think about Julie yelling at me with her megaphone and her clipboard. I think about the tow truck idling in the street. I think about the board president going pale when my attorney read the insurance clause. And I think about how close I came to just giving up and tearing it all down. But I did not give up. I documented everything. I built my case. I found allies. And when the moment came, I played the trump card I had been holding. A judge granted an injunction that stopped retaliation and towing threats immediately and ordered the HOA to void the lien threats. The injunction also included a provision that prohibited Julie from contacting me directly or filing any complaints related to my property without board approval. It was a clean win. The best part was watching the HOA realize they had been backing the wrong person. Julie had convinced them she was protecting property values, but really she was creating liability. When that became clear, they had no choice but to act. And when they acted, Julie lost everything she had built. She could not spin it. She could not intimidate her way out. The records proved she lied, and the board had to cut her loose. I still live in the Commons at Maplewood. The new compliance chair is reasonable, the board is cautious, and my fence is exactly where it is supposed to be, 2 inches inside my property line, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and completely legal. I appreciate you spending your time with me, and I will be back soon.